Brilliant.
Cool. Welcome everybody to Unsolicited Opinions, where, where we basically, find some people who are find some interesting Black people who are doing interesting Black things in the world. Today we are joined by Tafi Mazikana, who is the CEO and founder of Vimbo Health, as I understand it. How are you doing, Tafi?
Very good, thank you. Surviving the lockdown. Yeah.
hopefully better than some others.
Day 100 and what is it, 50?
At this point, I think numbers don't mean anything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Tafi, you, I remember I got in touch with you through a friend I assume a mutual friend of ours.
That's right, yeah.
Who explained that, you were doing something I found quite interesting, which was you created this mental health app.
That's correct, yeah.
Just sort of take us through. So like I know that I found that very interesting because there is a lot of push and hype behind the whole concept of like mental health and self-care and taking care of yourself. So sort of take us through what is the app? What does it do? Like, how did you get involved in it? Just give the whole origin story.
Okay, yeah. Because it's a startup, how I'm involved in it is very much intertwined, I guess, with the product itself, because startups are such a personal journey. And for me, the journey of mental health really started when I experienced what I interpreted as burnout. So my background is in finance. And I worked in finance in the UK. Firstly, I went to university and I studied finance. And then I started working in a career in finance over in the UK. And for the most part, I would have interpreted that I'm capable, I'm getting the job done, etc. But I came to a point where I personally felt just quote unquote burnt out. So I decided, luckily, to look out and see, well, what's available. And of course, the UK has the National Health Service over there, and a lot of the things they look at are, of course, targeted towards physical health, but they've been doing more and more towards mental health. And I was lucky to find treatment through that. And what I found interesting is I came in with a top level view of saying I feel burnt out, but after undergoing assessment and learning more, I actually realized that, wait a minute, a lot of these things that I'm talking about are actually things that have been with me for a long time, maybe to varying severities and degrees earlier on in life, but there were things that I sort of recognized. And when I sort of had that assessment and it was clear that I could do with some helpful treatments around depression and anxiety, that sort of brought me into the scope of understanding more about mental health, understanding that it's actually quite normal to feel a lot of the pressures and stresses and symptoms that come with that, but also, interestingly, that it's all very solvable, especially if we start to tackle it earlier. So I came into knowledge about mental health that made me more of an advocate for mental health therapies and for people seeking help, which led me to have a meeting of minds with my co-founder, who's my chief science officer and someone who worked in the NHS, worked in the UK, huge amount of experience in adapting therapies to the digital method of delivery. So we coalesced around a common passion for the topic, a passion for seeing it in the hands of more people, but also specifically a passion for saying, who's looking at Africa? It's all very well that digital health is becoming big, and there's a lot of things that are being proven in the real world, not theoretically, but in actuality, that are being proven to work through digital therapy in terms of getting treatment into the hands of more people. But who's looking at it for Africa? And we decided to really be those people and to develop a platform, develop a program targeted specifically at rolling out here, initially here in South Africa and then elsewhere. And that platform, really what it does is it brings in therapy based on cognitive behavioral therapy principles. So that's shortened as CBT in the industry, which is a form of therapy which is interesting because it's very modular and it's created with a view to empowering the individual. which makes it very suitable for this, for a self-guided learning experience, because it's really about educating you on more about how the mind works, more about how you work, and more about techniques that are relevant to you. Because I can't come into your life, Yolisa, and say, you need to do X, Y, Z. What is interesting is that you are the best person to actually to decide what steps you need to take. However, you just need the framework to make those decisions and to make those judgments. So that's really what our self-guided programs deliver. And what technology does is it gives us a way to engage with you in a more interesting way, because it would be very good. And it's actually interestingly been proven that self-guided therapy works. If I hand you a book that has self-guided therapy, that's been proven to have a good, pretty good chance of treating you, right? It's all about percentages. There's no one thing for everybody. Yeah. However, what's going to keep you coming back, right? It might be a very dry experience. It might be that you have to be very, very, very motivated to go through that. And with technology, we can make it more interesting for you. We can pull you back into the program. We can change how we deliver the program. We can create certain tools within our platform, at this stage, the mobile app, which really augment the learning and help you in the daily practice of your course. So that's really what we do. And just in closing to that question, we focus on two aspects. Because mental health is huge, right? It's absolutely massive. It might look like all the same thing from the outside, but once you get on the inside, there's a lot going on and there's a lot of moving pieces. And what we focus on is prevention, which is very important and often overlooked. Okay. As well as treatment. So when I'm talking about prevention, we're really talking about you're generally doing well, but it's useful for you to know this, because down the line you might not be doing well, which is what we term as lifetime prevalence in mental health. So that prevention is really upskilling you, because yes, you might be well, but who doesn't want to be even better? If you're well, fine, you will be even better. Maybe you'll become Superman or Superwoman when you step out into the workplace the next day, right? And then there's of course treatment, which is recognizing that, okay, there is a challenge. There's a diagnosable challenge, and how are we going to help bring this person's symptom scores, which are scaled within mental health, how are we going to help reduce those symptoms? And that's more of a treatment course, which is over a number of weeks, where you gradually develop your skills and then come out the other side of it, hopefully in a better way. Yeah.
I mean, that's quite interesting, because I remember speaking to a friend of mine who was in therapy and sort of has been in therapy her whole life. And we kind of not had a disagreement, but we kind of had different viewpoints about sort of the purpose. And I like what you're saying about, because it sounds like there is a sort of, you can do like a module, you can start and finish. Like you don't have to be, because I think her thing was that she had been in, I think she's sort of in her mid-30s, she had been in therapy since she was 15. And my question was, well, when does it end? Like,
okay.
when do you finally have the tools to, so is there, I suppose, is there like a tracking mechanism for like, okay, I can, as a person, I'm now able to do this or that, or do you just sort of, as the user, play it by ear and you're like, well, because also then how do you diagnose? It's just like, ooh, I may feel burned out, but I'm not sure. Maybe I'm paranoid, schizophrenic, who knows?
Yeah. Okay, so I guess there's a few questions in there. Yeah. But the first thing to note is that there's no one size fits all within mental health. And when you look at recovery, you're looking at really recovery rates. So when we look at the recovery rates for some face-to-face therapy, I believe the figures from the, just looking at the NHS as an example, for their people who go through cognitive behavioral therapy, I think they're looking at about 60-65% recovery rates, which means someone came into treatment. They had we term it a symptom score. So you'll do your standard measures around depression and anxiety, and we'll say, okay, that person has symptoms which rate as severe, for example. So these people started treatment, and for some people, over a course of therapy, let's say we say it will take 8 sessions to go through an entire therapy program, for example. Out of those people who started, some people didn't actually even need to get to the end of the treatment for them to become well. And when we say well, we mean that their symptom scores have come down sufficiently. So some people will actually be fine even before they finish a treatment course. And quite obviously, some people will not be fine at the end of that treatment course, in which case you might consider trying something else. Maybe you step up the level of the intervention. Maybe for that person, that particular point in time was the wrong time in their lives to really be doing this sort of treatment, and they'll come back to it later in life. So they might say, okay, fine, I did it now, but I wasn't ready to do it. Maybe my job is too stressful. I didn't have the time to really dedicate to trying this stuff, because it's not just about me giving you information. You then have to have the resources in terms of just emotionally, mentally, to practice that in the real world. So for some people, I genuinely believe there's a need to circle back and try again. For some people, it doesn't work, and maybe they'll try a different type of intervention. And for some people, maybe they just like the support and the guidance of having someone remind them to do these things, which is why you might potentially enter into a more long-term relationship with a therapist or a psychologist. Because I think it's quite different from I have a headache, I take a pill and the headache is gone. Because you're learning skills and habits, and those habits only work as long as you keep doing them and you keep practicing them. And it becomes a lifestyle of doing more positive things, basically. So I guess it's not so the answer is really, firstly, some people need to try other types of treatment, or they need to circle back into treatment. And secondly, that you might benefit from having someone help you along the way. And look, the symptoms might come back. They might flare up. There might be something that happens which I hate to use the word trigger, but that's often used. There might be something that happens that triggers those old things, and you have to deal with them again. So I think it's about having education and doing as much as you can to develop a more positive lifestyle.
Okay. Now, I find the conversation around mental health is different in different contexts. Like, for instance, with African parents, like, and I'd sort of love your take on it, like sort of going, yo, listen, or just like in an African context saying, listen, I'm burnt out, or I'm depressed, or like, people sort of look at you and they're like, what do you mean? Go back to work. Are you alive? Do you have food? What's your problem? Kind of thing. How have you found, especially as you have developed this app, how have you found navigating that? I don't know if it's necessarily stigma or ignorance, or even just the case of maybe people have quote unquote bigger problems. Like how have you found navigating that whole situation?
Yeah, I think what's interesting is culturally, we don't like to talk about it, especially amongst men, right? So for people to understand the importance of mental health, it can be difficult to get that message across. And whilst we are all fine being more woke in terms of like looking more woke or saying woke things or whatever, when the rubber meets the road, no one actually wants to have a conversation about it, like one-on-one, like me and you, let's talk about it. No one actually wants to. So I think people don't recognize it as as a problem a lot of times, which is where education is so important, because it's really sad in South Africa. I believe the stat is, what is it? Let me just look at it quickly. Yeah, that's right. Men are 4 times more likely to commit suicide, right? Than women,
Wow.
right? And then if you look at it at the same time, um, we're partnering with the South African Depression and Anxiety Group in a study that will be starting within the next couple of months. And if we look at their numbers, a 2017 study of calls coming into them showed that only 24% of them were for men. So men are making up 79% of suicide, but at the same time, make 24% of the people seeking for help within that particular avenue, you know, which shows that the problem is real, but getting people to talk about it and getting people to actually know that, look, it's normal. And by the way, it's solvable and it's treatable is, I think, a major challenge. And until we start to see mental health as being as important as physical health, I think it's going to be very hard to make enough progress in the social conversation.
Why do you think that is? Because I mean, those are surprising numbers, and I don't know. For me, it suggests that a lot of people are holding things in, and that may actually link to, for instance, because we have a lot of gender-based violence as well, and that might link to that, just in the sense that you are holding stuff in and then it like pops out. So why do you think men have such a problem sort of saying, like talking about this kind of thing?
This is going to be very subjective. So I'm going to talk from my personal experience of discussing the subject. So as I say, I went through therapy and realized how powerful it was. For me, the gap wasn't so much stigma. It was just pure, and I hate to use this word about myself, but it was an ignorance around the topic, right? I simply didn't know that some of the things, you know, I associated mental health with someone being in a very severe state of distress, maybe even institutionalized. Then you say, okay, that person has mental health difficulties. I didn't have an awareness of, well, what are the symptoms of having mental health issues? Are you feeling tired? You know, the physical symptoms, for example. Are you feeling tired? Even just stomach cramps, for example, can be associated with anxiety. So learning about the symptoms is what, yeah, exactly. And these are things that I would not have associated with mental health, right? I would have just associated them with some other, I don't know, reason. So having that awareness of okay, fine, these are the symptoms, and actually by developing certain skills and techniques, I can overcome these and be much better. I became aware of the space. But the point I was really trying to get to is that after developing that awareness myself, my first step wasn't to start this company. It was to become more of an advocate for mental health and talk to the men who I know, the people who are in my social circles, to say, and you know, I decided to be more vocal, to be very vocal, and put myself on the line, right? Which often feels comfortable. Even as I talk to you now, right? I'm uncovering about myself, it might be judged negative. Someone else could be viewing this and saying, this guy just really needs to man up, right? That's the solution. Right? But what I found interesting was the reactions that I was getting from people, because I would get mostly one of two reactions. When I suggested the resources that are available, I said, hey, this, you know, I did this thing. It was really useful. I'm learning so many techniques for managing worry. I feel so much more confident. I'm performing better in work. When I would then say, hey, if you want, this is where I got the help, someone would either be offended and say, are you trying, you know, not say outwardly, but the vibe of the conversation would be, what are you trying to say? Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, don't fight me, man. You know,
the messenger.
You know, like, here's the link, use it, don't use it, do whatever you want. So it was either that, or interestingly, more than once, right? The reaction was, can you send me that link? But it's not for me, it's for my friend who really needs it. right?
Oh, my friend.
My friend, yeah, that other person. And the thing is, in that situation, the person will want me to leave, knowing that I'm absolutely fine. It's my friend who needs it. And quite obviously, some people were receptive, but I just found it interesting that, and here we're talking about in London, right?
Yeah.
In a supposedly cosmopolitan place where mental health is significantly discussed. These are the reactions. So people are, I think, have a negative view to what it means to be a man in terms of talking. Does it make you less of a man if you say, I'm feeling a bit down consistently? I'm not who I want to be to my partner, to my friends, to my family. Is there something, what is this loop, this negative loop that's playing? And is there a way for me to disrupt that? Why is that negative information? It's almost a culture shift to say, what is the definition of being a man from a point of view of society? Because it's society that pushes these, to a certain extent, these norms upon us, right? And whilst, whilst I know, the discussions around gender rightly are about how we should do more to support women. And I'm totally all for that. But I think there has to be a discussion around how do we support men in the conversation around mental health. If there's a woman with them who is, women have men in their lives, right? How do they respond to their partner being a bit down, right? Do they respond by saying man up? And I use the term man up because it's such a loaded term. It's too
because you're almost like saying, stop being a weakling, like get over it, kind of. Yeah,
exactly. And what's your response to man up? Normally,
you immediately you get like aggressive. You pump your chest out. You're like,
yeah, right. That's a closure of conversation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because after someone says man up, that doesn't invite you to then say to a trusted person, which is helpful, right? That doesn't invite you to then say, hey, I've been feeling this way and this way. And for that person to then say to you, you know what, I actually felt like that as well. And then you know that at least that's a starting point. I'm not the only one who has experienced this or who has felt this. So I think it's about, to start to make some progress. We have to, especially I'm just talking in the male context because of course I'm myself a man. We need to make it okay to start having conversations and just reframe the man up terminology,
Yeah, I mean, I'm entirely with you. Like it is sort of amazing how as men we're sort of very good at, like, if you sort of find a vulnerable subject, like throwing out that kind of man up or some kind of version of it, so that, like, almost to protect ourselves from like accusations of weakness or whatever the case may be. But I wanted to sort of pivot for a second. I find it very interesting that, like, sort of you targeting Africa, because I think, as you mentioned, like in places like London, maybe conversations around mental health and just mental health care is, at least we think it is a lot, is of a sort of better, more acceptable standard, whereas here on the continent it's probably a little bit harder to find. How do you think building it as an app sort of helps sort of move the sort of mental health conversation in Africa specifically forward?
Yeah. So the reason why technology is useful is so I'm going to take a step back and say, firstly, why the focus on Africa and why not deploy this for London? Now, if you look at mental health gaps globally, there's no good statistic really anywhere on mental health. If you look at the US, the treatment gap, which is the number of people who are needing treatment, who should be having some form of treatment, right? Whether it's talking therapy or whatever, but are not having it, is 50%. If you look at the UK, some statistics will say even 60% or more. And that's a challenge, right? And people should work on that, and people are working on that, right? But then as those people focus on there, they don't have the time to focus on Africa, right? It's still 50% in the US.
Yeah.
They have their hands full trying to serve that need and trying to add to the mix of solutions for that. So who's going to really look at it for Africa, if not the people who have seen digital therapy? My co-founder is originally from Durban. People who've seen what works and what's possible in the realm of digital therapy. It's up to us, right, to be interested in the first place and work with it. And so when you look at Africa, unfortunately, the statistics get worse, as you've probably already guessed might be the case. So if you look at South Africa, the treatment gap, which is the number of people who should be getting care who are not in care, is at its best estimated at about 75%, right?
So 75% of people are not getting care when they should be?
Yes. People, snapshot today, gets 100 people in a room. You'll have a prevalence rate of who has anxiety or depression right now today. Let's say it's 4-point-something% based on World Health Organization stats. Those stats are based on people who've come in and said, I need help, right? But let's say 4%, of those, 75% wouldn't be getting any form of treatment, which is obviously a big shame. And in fact, it gets worse. Well, depending on where you look, UCT did a study last year, and they crudely estimated, in their words, a crude estimate of 92%, a 92% treatment gap, which is, of course, your 1 in 10 is getting some sort of care. And our challenge is bigger because, of course, we have less healthcare workers available to service the population. So in the presence of a high treatment gap, matched by low access to treatment, you need to start looking at what are other ways in which people can access some form of therapy, some form of treatment. And that's where we come to digital, because smartphone penetration is growing, continues to grow in Africa. We have a young population in Africa relatively to the rest of the world, which is good for adoption of technology. And it just eliminates those issues of the sort of clustering of healthcare workers in the big cities. It means that people obviously in smaller locations can get access to some form of care. And the numbers that are coming out around digital health are also very, very encouraging. And in some cases, digital therapy has been found to be as effective as your sort of traditional therapy. So the concept is to really add it to the mix. We still need psychologists. We still need psychologists to be there to provide that sort of high intensity of treatment. We're really talking about the other people, the 75% who currently don't have anything, and saying, let's get them on proven digital therapies, which can act as at least a first step, right? Because what you find is you have to look at the mental health as not individuals, but as how is the system structured. And you have to say, the trend is going towards what we call stepped care, which is essentially saying that you start with a low intensity, low cost intervention before you step someone up to a higher intensity intervention. And so that's where we sit by saying, look, let us be an earlier step intervention. Perhaps, let's say digital therapy has a recovery rate of 50%, right? But it costs 70% less money. Why not get people started on that low cost, low intervention type of therapy, treat at least a good chunk of the people, right? And then if people need a higher intensity form of therapy, then you move them up to that therapy. But unfortunately, what we have a lot in Africa and in South Africa is the system that doesn't really work for us because we can't afford it, where people go straight to the higher intensities of therapy. So just to give you another stat, in South Africa, I believe it's the 2017 figures, the 2016-17 figures for public mental health spend, all right, show that SA spent $615 million on mental health, which equates to 5% of the healthcare budget, which is it's in the lower end of the UN's sort of recommended range to spend on mental health, but at least it's there. Like, it's a starting point. It's a good chunk of money that's being spent, and that's great. But 86% of that was on inpatient care, which means we're treating people at the highest severity, at the higher intensities, and we're missing out on opportunities for prevention as well as early intervention. And so a lot is being done, but we're saying, let's try and refocus a little bit on early intervention. Let's refocus a little bit on prevention. Let's leverage technology which can get out to people quickly, which is more cost effective. So our programs can quite obviously be used by a broader number of people more quickly. And that's what we're really aiming for. And that's why we believe in digital, just to add to the mix, to add to the story of what's available here.
Okay. And I know you're right, like cost is a sort of big impediment. I mean, I just find even like in my daily life, like speaking to people who maybe want to go in therapy and it's like, oh, but it's 1,000 Rand a session or whatever the case may be. But with having said that, I have noticed that a lot of people, especially young people, are often reluctant to pay for apps. Like, everybody loves a free app, and then once it's like subscribe to the 1099, they're like, ooh, wait. How are you trying to sort of hurdle that fence?
Okay, yeah. So we're really looking at the people who are providing care, who are the interested parties, who are the people who are already paying for people to undergo some form of therapy. And that's really your employer is a key party who we're interested in, employers. And it's quite impressive in South Africa in the sense that a lot of employers already hire wellness coordinators to be a role within their company. So they're recognizing, if you're hiring a whole individual to come in and work, you're recognizing that wellness of employees is important. So I feel like that's gone some way. So we're offering to employers to take on our programs, and this is more in the prevention and the mental resilience space, to make those available for their employees. And the numbers are really impressive for the return to employers. Some studies show up to 500% ROI, return on investment, for employers who invest actively in employee mental health. And that's across absenteeism, presenteeism. Presenteeism is interesting because it's me turning up when actually my mind is still potentially in bed. I'm demotivated. I'm uninspired, and that presenteeism is very dangerous, and there's a huge ROI from that. And quite obviously, if I take anxiety as I can't do this job, if I'm treated as though I can't do this job because of that, quite obviously an outcome can be staff turnover and the cost of replacing those people. So there can be a very high ROI for employers and employees. And the benefit of having a digital platform is that it creates a lower bar of entry. So if you say to your employers, all you have, here is this mental resilience program, and here's the link. Anyone who wants to sign up, go and sign up. Your line manager doesn't need to know that you've signed up to this. Your colleagues don't need to know that you've signed up to this. But then you can start to learn those things that we talked about by yourself, right? Through our program, and obviously supported by the technology of the app. But you can commence that learning and start to upskill yourself in terms of certain tools, right? So that's a major group that we're very interested in. Of course, we focus also because we have capability within us, right? We focus also on treatment, and actually treatment is a very big part of what we're doing and of our objective. It's a bigger objective because we're looking more holistically, but it's what we want to do. And in treatment, we're looking at let's say, for example, there's a health insurer which is saying, look, mental health costs me in physical health, right? So there are I'm referencing studies a lot.
No, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. Everybody loves good numbers.
Hey, just in case you don't trust me, right? If you look at me, trust the study. Anyway, but there is evidence that improved mental health can reduce physical health costs by 50% or more. And when I say physical health, I mean unassociated with physical health conditions, unassociated with the actual mental health treatment. So if I have anxiety, for example, I can mistake my symptoms of anxiety for I'm having a heart attack or whatever, or some physical problem. And then I go to the hospital, I get checked out, all of these concerns, and even just the deterioration of because your body is one. Your body doesn't differentiate between mental and physical. It's only us who do that, right? Who separate the two areas of health. And so the general deterioration. So we're really interested in health insurers as well as a way for them to provide something to more people at the same time doing so cost effectively. So those are sort of the main areas where we're looking for those who currently look after people to add this to their suite of how they sort of care for those populations.
Okay. So, I mean, finally, if you're just a general civilian, how do you get the app? How do you start interacting? How do you?
We're exploring that. We are exploring that. We haven't come to a model of how we want it to work. The primary goal is to really get it into the hands of more people.
Yeah.
But as you say, getting the business hat on would describe that as a direct-to-consumer model. And in the space of, in our space, we're unsure how we want that model to work because, to be really honest, we don't want to be just a wellness. Wellness is very important, and prevention and early intervention are what we do. However, we're focused a lot on the treatment aspect, which is really looking at the referral pathways, which is looking at someone who is in a mode of what should we do for this person. We can put them on 2 psychologist sessions, for example, or we can try this and then put them on the psychologist. So, in short, we haven't determined how we're gonna do that. We might do that in the future. But if people are interested, if people say to us, we want this, we'll. So, if people are saying, hey, look, actually, your list is wrong and I'll pay for it. Right? Or I'm wrong. And they say, we're willing or we want it to be available, then we'll consider that.
Fantastic. Any sort of closing words? I think I've run through my questions.
In closing words, I think, I think, look, we're living in a time of a huge uncertainty, and we need to sort of recognize that it's having a toll on people, and that toll is not yet fully understood. So yes, we're dealing with the physical aspect. We're getting better at planning our day. We're getting better at knowing what not to do, what to do to stay safe physically. But there's the buildup of what we're concerned about, mental health issues as a result of this. And I think it's really just to encourage people to seek help. There are avenues that are out there. There are obviously platforms like us where we're working out how to distribute to people. But yeah, there's really ways to seek help, and people should start to do that. And in addition to that, I just want to sort of raise awareness of something we are doing now today around healthcare workers. So we have released our preventative program, our prevention and early, really just prevention and general wellness program. And we're making that available to companies now, and we're making it available to healthcare workers for free during the time of really this. Yeah. So it's something that we're just trying to play our part, because this is a looming crisis on the mental health side of things. And, with the healthcare workers, we always say they're exposing themselves to huge stress. Imagine the fear of getting COVID-19 yourself, perhaps passing it on to a family member. You're working a lot, and perhaps, in new situations. If I'm doing a job that doesn't involve a risk to my life, and everything changes, the scenario changes, I'm going to find that stressful, let alone with a risk. So we really just want to be there for them, and we've made this available. So seek help and follow our journey.
Cool. Thank you so much for your time. This has been brilliant. I think this is a fantastic idea, and I love the fact that it is coming from within the continent. So I wish you guys all the best, and who knows, hopefully people will say I'm wrong and tell you guys we need that.
Yeah. Hey, maybe they'll say I'm wrong too. And because that's what we want. More people.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Cool.
Appreciate it. Take care, bro.